All right, we're back with another segment of Envision Lake Charles with Marshall Simien. Again, Marshall, thank you for having us here. And man, yesterday we had a few topics that we talked about that were very intriguing, very eye-opening for the city.
I call those grown-up conversations.
Grown-up conversations, yeah, which are needed, are very much so needed. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. You know, we talked about economic development. In today's segment, I want to talk more about the community investment from the housing standpoint. And what are your takes on that, the importance of community investment?
Well, in the housing sector, you know, we've been through these storms. So I look at pre-hurricane housing versus post-hurricane housing. You know, pre-hurricane, some areas of our city had some pretty old housing stock that wasn't that strong anyway. And we've got new subdivisions coming up everywhere, and you're starting to see a change. But post-hurricane, the hurricanes have shown that even the way we're building housing now has to evolve to meet better standards. So, for instance, you look at the overall city. When you talk about community investment, what has already been invested that should be helping with housing? Well, some of the areas of the city, the northern part, the eastern part of Lake Charles, where the housing is anything pretty much north of I-210, the housing stock is aging a little, and you're starting to see what I call donut holes, where you're having entire communities that either the houses are gone or they're falling apart or whatever else. But what you have in place is roads. You got infrastructure, you got roads, you got sewer, you got drainage. But the most important thing, those areas have close proximity to the areas where you want them to be, close to the downtown area, close to shopping, close to the services that build communities. So the key to housing is first of all, identifying what type of housing we need. You know, you got rental housing, you got home ownership. Not everybody wants to rent, they want to pay themselves, but not everybody's meant to own a home because they don't want to deal with the maintenance and all that stuff.
That's correct.
So on the housing side, I look at it from how do you take housing and make it resilient, where it's going to withstand what some of the things we go through. Well, on the community foundation, Project Build the Future is building a subdivision across from Conbury Fondale Elementary School. And it's supposed to be a resilient housing structure. Now, there's certain housing fortifications that help, called gold fortified and silver fortified housing. Gold fortified housing is housing that is going to withstand 100 up to 140 miles an hour winds, and it's going to have different things like impact resistant glass, straps. When you build a slab, you put a steel beam in the slab and bolt all the load bearing parts to that beam, so that just like the Wizard of Oz, in order for that home to be taken away, the whole thing would have to be taken up. But then you also put the straps in and the bracing and everything else, where any type of force that comes against it is distributed evenly, so that keeps the house from falling apart.
Keeps it intact.
Now, but to build a house that's gold fortified, that's extra cost. And one of the things that we deal with, especially in communities like ours, is affordability. So what we did with the Community Foundation, we are actually supplementing the houses that are being built to that standard, gold fortified. And we adding grants to those. But the key is we're not letting that extra cost be a profit. It can't be passed on. So it keeps the house affordable. Contractor still makes whatever margins they need to make this, to continue building housing, but that cost is eaten. I think the city can do the same. We use things like community development block grant funds, you know. Sometimes they put those things in the streets or whatever else, but it can be used to be put into housing so that as people are building housing, you can go ahead and make sure that there's that fortification. And if you look at places like, when you hear about hurricanes and strong storms, one of the states you don't hear about a whole lot is Alabama. You'll hear about Florida being devastated, Georgia, but you always wonder why not Alabama? Well, Alabama already uses a lot of gold fortified housing. And when there's a famous video that I saw where they put a regular built house, gold fortified house, in a wind tunnel and increased the wind speeds and everything else. And at the end, the house that was stick built, I mean, it looked like what we saw after the hurricanes. But the one that was gold fortified, it had a few shingles missing. Wow. No real substantive damage. And that's the standards we should be trying to get to. But if we can pass that cost, if we can put that cost in to make this come in, these type of houses built to this standard, but not pass that cost on to the person that's buying the home, they can afford the homes. But Dinah, the better end of it, even if you can afford a home, can you afford the insurance?
There you go.
That's the sweet spot that everybody's running across. But if you've got a gold fortified home, the insurance looks at that, because now the insurance looks at risk. Our state started supplementing insurances, paying the money to keep writing insurance. I can tell you, I represented a number of insurance companies. They're not looking at, you can't pay us enough money to assume risk that we're not prepared to handle.
Yeah.
But if you can manage your risk that I have, I'll write you insurance. So by doing this, you get the house built to a certain level that's going to protect it, but it's not an additional cost to the person buying it. But now the insurance becomes affordable too. And like I said before, once you get people into a situation where they own homes, they can insure the homes, they can raise their families, they're paying themselves, first of all, that's their investment, but they're concerned about crime. They're concerned about schools. They're concerned about things in the neighborhood. They support their local businesses. And I think that's the way you come to a resilient community.
Wow. And that the important aspect of that is, again, having these conversations, because if we don't know that these are the possibilities that are out there,
Right.
then we're faced with just walking into the wilderness blind.
Yeah.
So if we don't prepare to have changes in effect to prevent from having to, because we can't prevent another disaster.
No.
But we can prevent how long it takes to recover from
And we can try to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position to survive and thrive. For instance, most cities, most areas, the oldest part is people settle in places that were the highest and the best suited for whatever they need to do. And that talks about drainage. If I'm in, I'll give you an example. I'm familiar with North Lake Charles, 'cause I represented that area on the council. North Lake Charles is one of the highest areas in the city. It would take a lot to make it flood. When these kind of disasters come in, and thank goodness Laura was a windstorm, because if it had been a wind and water storm, people would get beat back and forth between what was wind-related damage, what was water-related damage, and if you didn't have flood insurance, you're stuck out there.
Yeah.
So if you start reinvesting back in places where you already have roads, you've got utilities, everything else, but you're also on high ground, then you start building back in areas that really was the first places that's historical significance to building back in these areas. And when you do that, not only do you you rebuild your city in a way that's going to make it, you're going to preserve what you already have, because you're not having to go out and build new streets and whatever else. It works. If I'm a contractor, if I've got places that already got the infrastructure in, I've got land prices that are reasonable, and I can build a house that's going to be way more desirable in the market because it's gold fortified. That's a win-win. The consumer's going to win. The homeowner's definitely going to win. The neighborhood's going to win because it's revitalizing, and it's going to keep the insurance companies happy. The people are going to have more disposable income to spend, and they'll be able to raise their families in a safe environment.
Wow. And when you talk about that, the one element that we have to really discuss is the safety aspect of the community.
Yeah.
When you're looking at community safety, and not just on a police standpoint, but just the community safety as a whole, how do you combat that? Because people still are afraid to walk out of their house at night. Some people are afraid to invite other friends and family over. How do we pivot from that and make this a safer community?
Some people look at it as we need to have more police on the street, strengthen the police force, and everything else. But there's another spot too. I always look at the human condition. I mean, the human condition is people do things, and then there's this energy that comes out of them. I practice law. My primary profession is a lawyer, but I have this excess energy, so I do public service. I think I can give back to the community, and that takes its own energy. But you've got people out there, you've got young children that if there's nothing to focus that energy that's in them, the streets are waiting to take them and have them do things that you're not happy with. You don't want it to become a blight on the community, and there's some very talented children out there. They know how to do a lot of things. They've got talents, whether it's electronic talents, mechanical talents, what they can do with their hand, just what they can discern. And those are all things that I think God put in people to benefit us. But if it's not, what they say, idle mind is a playground of the devil.
Playground of the devil.
So
Correct.
I think not just the law enforcement, but I think we need to have some robust recreation programs, some robust activities, some robust interests that get people to use that energy for other things. I remember talking to a boys' home in New Orleans, very rough group. Talked to them about their talents, and one kid, me and my wife were eating at the Houston's restaurant. This guy came up to us. He had a chef outfit on, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, you're a lawyer?" And I'm thinking, "Oh man, I'm trying to eat supper with my wife." But he said, "Were you at Milner's Boys' Home a couple of years ago?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you talked to me about how this energy and the way I use my talent." He said, "I used to cook with my grandmother all the time. I loved cooking with her. But I thought on the streets that made me a sissy, so I got away from it." He said, "When you talked about that," he said, I started looking at culinary schools. I enrolled in a culinary school. I am now an associate chef at this particular restaurant. I want to shake your hand."
Wow.
That's the potential that we have. So we can either lock them up, and the legislature's changing the laws now. Where you're young, you're going to be tried as an adult.
As an adult, correct.
And you've got people out there that have scarlet letters on them from things that happened when they were in their late teenage years, early 20s, that's keeping them from participating in our society. So I think if you give people a sense of hope, sense of direction, and you can channel that energy, I think you're going to reduce crime there. Because understand, the most important thing for a policeman is they want to go home to their families at night too, so they don't need to fight. I mean, they're going to deal with criminals, but they don't need the excess, because us as a society is not taking the steps we need to enhance our safety and help them along the way.
Yeah. And, before we wrap up this segment, I have a question for you. It may be a tough question, but I know you can answer it. What do you think? Let me ask you this way. What area of the city is the most important area to you?
To me, now it all depends on what your importance is. My importance is that everything that I'm talking about doing, you got to find a way to pay for it. You cannot get people to raise their taxes because people are getting taxed enough, and there's going to be a thing on the ballot to raise the state side of the sales tax even more. How do you pay for things? So I think the most important areas of the city are where the biggest flows are through. I-10, I-210. I think if we can figure out how to get those two to bring in money and generate revenue, that's going to expand our economy enough in the private sector and also the tax side, so that we can pay for a lot of things that we need as a society. Now, my campaign is working on a 7-year window where we're going to have a new I-10 bridge. But if you look at the I-10 corridor now, most of the things tell you to keep going. So, but other cities, along I-10, Lafayette's about to put a Buc-ee's. That's going to be a phenomenal game changer, because that's going to stop a number of cars, bring new money into that city, and then you're going to have this growth all around that to capture that energy. So I think those two corridors are the most important. There's a lot of focus on the lakefront, but I think the whole I-10 corridor, 80,000 cars plus a day passing through, if we can figure that out, I think that's going to help bring more money into our economy, more people in to enjoy our city and highlight our city. If you look at somebody drive, how the outside of their house looks, really makes you decide whether you want to see what's on the inside or even be around there.
That's correct.
And so if we fix up our I-10 corridor, our lakefront is our front porch. That's the presentation that we give to the city. That's how we present ourselves.
Yeah.
We lost the iconic building that defined us as a city, and those things matter. So I think those are the important areas. Then, if you look at where you lay your head, where you raise your family and create your memories, then I think you have to look at housing. What's the most important areas are going to be the neighborhoods, because that's where the human condition is at its strongest. So
Wow.
It all depends on what you want.
Absolutely incredible, man. So that's a great segment that we just talked about. The importance of the economic development, community investment, and housing. I think are some things that we have to continue to expand on.
Yeah.
But we're gonna expand on a little bit more when we come back in
Okay.
another segment of
Yeah.
Envision with Lake Charles, with Mr. Marshall Simien, candidate for mayor for Lake Charles 2025. So
25.
that's it.
Yeah.